Good morning from the shores of the Potomac River, and welcome to part 3 of my clothing adventure, how to make a more historically accurate Mary Sanderson outfit. Today, we're going to talk about pockets. Now, strictly speaking, pockets weren't part of the original Disney movie costuming for Mary Sanderson, but they are more historically accurate than having pockets on your apron. So we're going to do this. And now, this is an example of a pocket from the Winter Fur Museum, and this is real size. It's about 17 inches high. But I don't like something this big, and it's just for a costume. So I found a smaller example in a museum collection, and that's what we're going to do today. So join me in the sewing studio while we make a pocket for Mary Sanderson. On the test pocket, there was stitching around the interior of the cross hatching, and it had very faint scrolling designs according to the museum, but I had to stare at that photo for a long time and I could not work out the scrolls, so I just did some scrolling, and then the quilting was done free motion. But in my mind, it doesn't add any sort of aesthetic appeal to it, so I'm just going to do cross hatching for the second pocket. The original pocket was made out of silk, but I decided to use linen so that the pocket is washable. The first thing I'm going to do is use this marker to draw lines on the fabric. There's two sides to this marker. One is disappears by air, and the other disappears by washing. I'm using the air side. And I realize this doesn't show up well on camera, but you can see me drawing lines across the linen. So I'm going to do a set of lines in one direction. And then I'm going to flip the ruler 90 degrees and line up the ruler with the lines that are already drawn so I get perfect squares as I'm making this second set of lines, which again I know you can barely see on camera, if at all. Now that the lines are done, it's time to trace the pocket pattern onto this piece of fabric. So this is my pattern, and I'm going to go around the pocket and mark the outline that will tell me how far to the edge of the fabric I have to quilt. Now it's time to make the quilting sandwich. You have the backing, which is a scrap piece of linen, the batting, which is cotton batting in the middle, and then the pocket design on top. In order to further prepare this, I'm going to pin it. And now it's pinned. So let's go to the sewing machine. On the sewing machine, I'm using something called a walking foot, which is used specifically for quilting. It allows the 3 layers to go through the machine and not bunch up as it would be doing if we were using a regular foot. So now, please enjoy the large amount of sewing that I have to do to quilt this fabric. I want to say that if I was being truly historically accurate, I would be doing all this quilting by hand. But I'm not being truly historically accurate. I'm using a sewing machine. Now that the fabric has been washed and dried, it has the same texture as its sister pocket here. You can see it's got the same texture. So now I'm going to trace around the first pocket to make sure that it's the same size. So now we're just going to mark around this pocket. And I'm not concerned if I get some marker on this pocket because I just throw it in the laundry again. I make costumes so that they're washable. I don't like to make something that is dry clean only. So here we go. And there's our pocket. All right, at this point, you can use whatever method you want to find the center of the pocket and draw a line down that center. In this pocket, I've drawn a line about 6 inches down. And now I'm going to cut into the pocket. I recommend that you do this very carefully because you only get one chance. Here I am pinning some bias binding that I made from the same fabric onto the slit of the pocket. This is a very fussy process, and there are no hints, tips, or tricks that I can tell you to do this simply. I've pinned it, I'm sewing it by hand, and then I'm going to over sew it with the machine. Now that the front side has been attached to the slit, I'm going to turn the pocket over and pin the binding onto the back side so that can be 100% sewn down by hand. All I'm going to do is take the unattached side of the bias binding and pull it around to the back and pin it into place. Now that the binding is pinned down on the inside of the pocket, I'm going to start hand sewing. Now that the pocket slit is completely bound, it's time to add the back of the pocket to the front of the pocket. So that's what this is. This is just a scrap piece of linen. It's heavier than the other linen that I used on the top and the back side of the quilt sandwich, but this will make sure that you have a very sturdy pocket. It doesn't matter what side you pin on. I just happen to be pinning on the back. I've sewn the back to the front off camera, and now I need to true up the edges, make the edges on the top of the pocket nice and flat. Now that the pocket front and back have been sewn together around all the edges, I'm going to take some handmade bias tape binding and pin it to the pocket. And there we are. And now I'm going to take it to the machine and machine sew it on. Now that the binding is sewn on to the pocket, it's time to flip it over and pin the back into place. And now it's time for, you guessed it, more hand sewing. I've skipped ahead to the part where I'm attaching the pocket to the waistband because I didn't think that you needed to see one more shot of a finished pocket. So here I am. I'm pinning the pocket to the waistband, and I'm going to take it over to the sewing machine and sew it down on the sewing machine. Even though I'm using a sewing machine, I am going to use slightly large stitches in case these pockets get given to somebody else who is a different size, and then the pockets can be removed and readjusted as necessary. Now I'm at the final pinning stage where the pocket backside is pinned in place as well as the rest of the length of the waistband. It may seem that this is a lot of work, but this pocket can be made in a day. And here's everything all pinned, and it's time to go away and watch a movie and do some hand sewing.
2 hours later.
And the project is done. The pockets are ready to wear, and we're finished with this episode. Join me next week when I post about finishing the plaid petticoat. See you later.